Help defend the Church by becoming a supporter of OnePeterFive. Your tax-deductible contributions enable us to continue our work to restore Catholic culture and rebuild Catholic tradition. Make a real difference in the Church. Go to onepeterfive.com/donate today.
You're listening to the OnePeterFive podcast.
It is a real joy for us to welcome you all here. Habemus Papam.
Rebuilding Catholic culture, restoring Catholic tradition.
My guest today is Louis Brown, director of the Christ Medicus Foundation, a Catholic healthcare sharing ministry that increasing numbers of the faithful are turning to in lieu of traditional insurance. Now, a few years ago, I wrote an article, I think for Catholic Vote, about how I wish there was a Catholic health sharing option. This was on the dawn of the Affordable Care Act being implemented, and my wife and I were exploring some of these health sharing options that were almost always Protestant ministries. And then some point thereafter, Louis tried to contact me, and I became elusive because I was always doing something else. And we finally connected, and we wanted to talk about this very interesting alternative. So, Louis, thank you for being on the podcast with me today.
It's a real pleasure to be with you, Steve. Really appreciate the time.
So, what is your story, and how did this thing come about and so quickly?
Right. And I appreciate the introduction. Just to clarify for anyone listening, I'm the director of CMF CURO. It's the healthcare ministry of the Christ Medicus Foundation. So I work for our executive director, Mike O'Day, wonderful man, who's one of the founders. And CMF CURO is a Catholic healthcare ministry, a program of the Christ Medicus Foundation. And CMF CURO got together and partnered with Samaritan Ministries International to provide a Catholic healthcare sharing option. Members of our ministry also joined Samaritan Ministries International and are empowered, really. Catholics are empowered through their membership in CURO as well as their membership in Samaritan Ministries International to do healthcare sharing, but within the context of a Catholic ministry that is CMF CURO.
Can we back up for 1 second, because we didn't really explain it in my intro or in your answer. What is healthcare sharing ministry? What is that?
Sure. And really it is a new way of living the old missionary sense of the church. In the early church, if you read about it in Acts, would share everything in common. The Lord is about bringing people together, and he's about many things, but of course he's about community and unity. And so in healthcare sharing, you have Christians that are coming to live their faith in their healthcare by coming together to share each other's burdens and bear each other's needs, is what is commonly said. And in practice, and in the human sense of what that means, it's Christians coming together to directly share their medical cost in full. And so members of Samaritan Ministries International, who are also members of CURO, every month for their health, to pay for their healthcare needs, will send a share payment every month to another member of the ministry. So it's a share payment, not a premium payment. And instead of sending it to an insurance company, you send it to another member of the ministry. So this month, I will be sending in the mail a check to a woman who has a medical need. I know what her medical need is, generally speaking. I will write her a prayer note, and I will send that check directly to her. She will receive checks from across the country that will enable her to pay for her medical bill in full, and that's how she pays for her health care. It's really a beautiful way for Christians to depend on the body of Christ, the Christian faithful, to pay for their medical needs, as opposed to doing it in some other alternative fashion. And it's a beautiful way for people to live their faith in their healthcare, depend upon the providence of God, depend upon the Christian faithful to pay for their medical needs, really living in an active charity and active solidarity with our brothers and sisters across the country. So Samaritan Ministries International, who we've partnered with, they have 58,000 households, in excess of 58,000 households, I believe, around the country, all 50 states. And all these different households will share their medical costs by directly sending each other checks and paying for their medical bills in full. And members of our ministry of CURO are seeking to do healthcare sharing, but in a uniquely Catholic way. So they join CURO. They join this Catholic community, just Catholic ministry. They also join Samaritan Ministries International. And by being members of CURO, it enables our members to live their faith and their healthcare in a uniquely Catholic way, to participate in the healthcare sharing of Samaritan Ministries International. But in addition to that, have a Catholic community in which they can do that, both from a spiritual sense and also in a human sense. CURO adds some additional features to kind of allow healthcare sharing to be even more beautiful, more convenient, more accessible to our members.
So I know you're pressed for time today, but there are a couple of questions that this kind of raises that I want to hit at. And so
Sure.
We had talked a little bit about what we were going to discuss beforehand, but I want to jump around a little bit.
Sure, no, that's fine.
One of the things that immediately comes to my mind is, so we have these healthcare ministries that exist already. You have MediShare, you have Samaritan Ministries International. I think those are the two big ones.
Right.
You had to piggyback this Catholic ministry onto one of those because of what existed in the law, right?
Right. So what happened was the Affordable Care Act, and literally thanks be to God, has an exemption that says if an individual joins a ministry that is a healthcare sharing ministry under certain circumstances, under certain conditions, that individual, that American citizen, that person is deemed to be exempt from what's called the individual mandate of the Affordable Care Act. So essentially what it says is, if John Q. citizen joins a healthcare sharing ministry that meets certain qualifications, they are not going to be fined under the Affordable Care Act. Otherwise,
for not being covered,
not having insurance.
Right.
So if one decides to join certain healthcare sharing ministries under certain qualifications, they are no longer required to purchase health insurance. What the act said, what the law said, was that you can go and join a healthcare sharing ministry and be exempt, but you're only exempt if you join a healthcare sharing ministry that existed as of December 31st, 1999. The problem with that is that as of December 31st, 1999, there were no Catholic healthcare sharing ministries. And so in order for a Catholic ministry to empower Catholics to have this as an option, but to also be exempt from the law and not have to worry about the fines, we had to partner with an existing ministry that we thought would fit very well with the Catholic community, and we definitely have that in the wonderful ministry at Samaritan.
What would be the chief distinctions between? I mean, I'm sure. So what happened with us? I'll just be straightforward about it. Is
Sure.
My insurance payments for my family went up, I think about 1,000%. I'm not really sure what it was. Our existing plan was one of the ones that got phased out. So we went from paying anywhere between $300 and $600 a month, I think, for insurance, to we were looking at a $1,400 or $1,500 a month payment because the Affordable Care Act isn't so affordable. And so that was what we were looking at. And so we started looking into these ministries, and we kind of got on board with one a while ago. But what I'm curious about is, so how would CMF CURO be different than a MediShare or a Samaritan? I mean, these are Christian ministries. What are the distinguishing factors between these two now that more and more people are having to look to go to this because they're facing the same situation I was?
Right. So our partner is Samaritan Ministries International, and I think what's unique about Samaritan Ministries is that members directly share amongst each other. So there's no pooling of funds or anything like that, but members are directly sharing and directly sending checks to each other. And it very much fits the, it's very consistent with the move in the broader culture, the secular culture, towards community, towards sharing. And so we're directly connecting Christians all over the country, and really that's what Samaritan's doing. With CURO in particular, what's unique about CURO is there's some additional features that CURO has. We provide our members with pricing information that allows them to negotiate what they should be paying to their doctor, to their specialist, to the hospital for a certain procedure that's been provided. And that's unique to CURO. So we provide our members with reference pricing. We also provide our members with what is called a healthcare sharing debit card. We call it the CMF CURO membership debit card. And it allows members of CURO uniquely to have the option of receiving the checks from the other members of the ministry on a debit card that then allows them to pay for their medical bills with that debit card.
That's a big deal. Both of those are a big deal.
It is. The pricing just gives our members information about, what's a good price, what's a bad price.
Because most of us aren't ever in the position of having to negotiate that. You're used to going in, you give them your insurance card, it just gets taken care of. You don't really know what's going on behind the scenes.
That's right. So it's very helpful. It provides what we call kind of an active knowledge, so that just having that pricing information, our members don't have to find it out themselves. They don't have to do the research. They don't have to figure it out themselves. They're given that pricing information after they go into the doctor's office, and essentially the doctor's office puts in information that's on their membership debit card. 2 weeks later, and hopefully over time it'll be less than that, members will receive information about the price that they should be paying, that we believe that the members should be paying. And the price that we're encouraging members to pay is about 125% of the Medicare rate, so 25% more than the Medicare rate. And that enables them, again, to have a starting off point and hopefully a final point of negotiation with their medical provider. And then also just the convenience of receiving checks onto one's card allows you to pay for the medical need, not after having to go to the bank to deposit,
process all the paperwork,
right, and then write a check up against your bank account, but rather the checks go onto the card and you're able to use it just like you would any other debit, Visa card, by calling up and providing the card information, or doing it in person, or inputting it online if that provider has that option. So
does CMF CURO have sort of its own pool of sharers and funds, or is it kind of intermixed with the larger Samaritan?
It's completely mixed within the Samaritan Ministries International.
So it's a larger pool, which is financially a better picture for people who are participating in it because there's more people, right?
Right. So we are, our members, we have about a little over 800 households that are in 50 states that are currently engaging in sharing, and they're sharing directly with the 58,000 households in Samaritan Ministries International. Okay,
and then what about, I know that some of these sharing ministries, especially the Protestant ones, they have certain restrictions. Like they say, the Bible says you shouldn't drink and all this kind of stuff. And Catholics have a little bit of a more sacramental view of some of those things. And
Sure.
You don't have to sign. I mean, do Catholics have to sign those same kinds of pledges to be a part of it?
They do, but a couple things. It matches up fairly neatly with the Catholic faith, in the sense that in terms of the many requirements of the ministry, it basically says in order to be a member for Samaritan Ministries, and you should be in a state of grace. It doesn't say that, but that's how we would understand it. So a person can join the ministry and either abstain from alcohol or drink in moderation. Mm-hmm. And we know as Catholics that if we were to drink, to a point of drunkenness, that would be a mortal sin. Right. And so there's there's no issue really there. With regard to the use of tobacco, it is a little bit of a departure in that sense. And so members of Samaritan Ministries can only smoke for celebratory occasions. If someone is a routine chain smoker, or pulling out a cigar or a pipe every day, they would not be eligible to join the ministry. But that's just, we believe that the Lord calls us to be stewards of our own health as well as the health of our brothers and sisters. Sure. Just knowing the serious effects of smoking, I think people would just understand that. And then, in terms of the additional requirements, folks have to go to church 3 times a month, and we know as Catholics we need to go once
every Sunday, right.
Every Sunday. So it's really, the requirement of being a faithful Catholic is really even stronger than that. So I don't think there's any issue there, as well as the fact that members should be having physical intimacy only with
their
spouse and not outside the context of marriage, which of course again is consistent with the moral requirements of our Catholic faith.
Right, and it's understandable in a sharing ministry. You don't want to be sending money to somebody who's living a lifestyle that's sinful, and you're essentially paying for that. I mean, that's
right. That's right.
That's understandable. You mentioned the price point of negotiation with healthcare providers, the 125% of Medicaid, I believe you said, or Medicare. I can't remember.
Medicare, that's right.
Okay, Medicare, which is a good deal for physicians because they're getting more money than you'd be getting on government assistance.
That's right.
But in general, how does the healthcare cost with a sharing ministry compare to other healthcare options?
It's much cheaper. For someone that has an employer-sponsored insurance plan, and they're only paying they're only giving what is commonly called an employee contribution, it may be the same. It may be a little bit less. It may be a little bit more. But for especially someone who works as an independent contractor, they work as they own their own business. They're self-employed.
Right.
They're paying premiums for a private individual insurance plan. The costs are going to be 50%. To 70% cheaper.
Yeah.
For a family.
It's why I'm in it.
Right. So for a family of, for a family, a married couple with children, they're going to be paying, all in, and again, it doesn't include preventative care, but if one has a medical need, per year, they're going to be paying most likely less than $7,000 a year.
Right.
Whereas for many private individual insurance plans, people are paying $1,000 more a month in premiums.
Yeah, and the deductibles are still getting really high on a lot of those programs.
Right. And just as a correction, I would say a better way of phrasing, just to correct myself earlier, I would say people would save at least 30% and as much as 50% in terms of a cost differential. Higher than that is definitely possible.
And you're not talking monthly premium cost differential. You're talking an annual out-of-pocket expense, right?
That's right. And I think another thing to think about, too, is that it's not just a fine point. We only want folks to and really it's not about what we want as a ministry, but I think the Lord wants to. Bishop Barron had a great speech that I constantly reference, a talk about faith. And the Lord wants to be Lord over everything, including the healthcare decisions that we make as a family, because he loves us as a father. And so people should let the Holy Spirit, both the supernatural and natural reality of their lives, dictate their healthcare decisions. And we believe that many Catholics are called to healthcare sharing. We believe that many Catholics may not be, just dependent upon their particular situation and the way in which the Lord's calling them. And so that's the most important thing. And in that way, as Catholics are considering healthcare sharing, it's important that they understand that healthcare sharing is not just like choosing another insurance plan. It's not health insurance at all. It's a cultural shift in how one does their healthcare. And so it's very important that people, pray about it, do the research, and make sure that it makes sense from both the supernatural and the natural reality of their lives.
It gives you an opportunity to be your brother's keeper.
That's right. And that's the beautiful thing. But we want, if someone has serious pre-existing medical conditions, there's real strong limitations on sharing of that. And so it would not make sense. It may not make sense for them to join.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think, I know you got to go in a minute, but one of the big questions that I wonder about, and I'm sure most people do when they start going down this road of looking at this option, people have insurance because they're worried about catastrophic industry or illness. They're worried about cancer. They're worried about brain surgery. They're worried about those kinds of things. When something like that happens and you're in a sharing ministry, I mean, the costs for that can be astronomical. Are those kinds of things something that get paid out if they happen after a member is already involved?
In terms of more higher medical needs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, I mean, I think the way that it works with for members of CURO that do healthcare sharing through Samaritan Ministries International, and for all Samaritan Ministries International members, is that if one has a medical need, and again, we're not talking about pre-existing medical needs, but once they join a ministry and they have a medical need that comes about, that need is shared up to $250,000 for any one need. So theoretically, if I have 5 needs in 1 year, each one of those would be shared by the members of the ministry up to $250,000 for each and every one of those, 5 or 6 needs for that year.
Okay.
The overwhelming majority, and I think it's a safe bet to say, well over 90% of medical claims never go over
Right.
$100,000. So
Right.
that captures the overwhelming majority of medical needs. But definitely there are a number, a lot of people have medical needs that go above $250,000. It's again relatively uncommon, but it does happen. And so there's ways of people. There's ways that Samaritan Ministries International, there's additional layers of sharing, what's called the Save to Share program, where people essentially escrow a certain amount of money that they are only asked to contribute into to a certain family if a family has a need that's above $250,000. So about half of the families that are in Samaritan Ministries International will escrow a couple $100 a year away. And if there's a need that's above $250,000, the ministry will use up to half of that total pot and call upon those members to submit that Save to Share money for that member that has a need that's above $250,000.
So do you have time for one last question?
Oh, sure.
So, I think about things like the case with the Little Sisters of the Poor. Is this something that can kind of become a replacement for employers who are trying to offer an option through their small businesses? They don't really have the choice of just saying, hey, we're only going to pay if you do a healthcare sharing ministry. Is there a restriction there, or would that be something that would help a group like that?
For employers, I think healthcare sharing is definitely an option. And for a lot of employers, I think they would want to say that healthcare sharing is one of many options. It may, depending upon the demographic and the culture, the business culture of the employer, it's very likely that they would want to say, we're going to continue to offer healthcare and health insurance in particular, but they very well may, especially Catholic employers, very well may want to say, but we're also going to offer this healthcare sharing option. For an employer that's over 50 employees in almost all situations, not all, but almost all situations, they're going to be required by the Affordable Care Act, the employer mandate, to offer some type of health insurance product to their employees. For a company that's under 50 employees, they very well may say that we're not going to do insurance. We're going to offer our employees a healthcare sharing option, or encourage our employees to look at a healthcare sharing option. So that it definitely is an option, but I would not say that healthcare sharing in and of itself, by itself, is a solution to all the different healthcare needs for all 300 million Americans. But we do believe that it very much is one of the key solutions, not the solution, but one of the key solutions to growing a healthcare culture that reflects the beauty, the love, the charity, the community of God.
If people want to find out more, where can they go?
They would go to CMFCURO.com. It's CMFCURO.com. CMF is the acronym for the Christ Medicus Foundation, and CURO is a Latin word which means to heal, to care for.
Okay, so I'll make sure that I also put a link to that in the show notes today. Is there, I should have asked you because we're coming up on that time of year. There are open enrollment periods in the spring. Is this something that falls under those same guidelines?
No. People, it's like it's really truly joining a Christian community and a Catholic community in CURO. And so people would just discern that. So they're free to enter anytime they would like, and they're free to leave anytime they would like. And again, there's no restraint there. It's just, we want as many folks as the Lord is calling into this community, is calling into this ministry. We would love them to join from all over the country, but only as long as the Lord is moving them in that direction. If there ever comes a time where someone would want to move into a different direction, then they are free to do so without penalty. And so it is very much a free association of Christians, and for CURO, for Catholics, to participate in this beautiful ministry with their brothers and sisters in the Lord, come into community, live deliberately in their healthcare, share with their brothers and sisters in the Lord, but only for the time in which they believe that the Lord is calling them into. We think for a lot of folks it's going to be a long time, but the beauty of it, it's not like an insurance company, and it doesn't act in that way. It's a free community that we believe and hope is always led by the Spirit.
Well, I'm sure that there are a lot of questions that we didn't get to. So if our listeners and readers have questions, would you be interested in coming on again and maybe addressing some of those?
I would absolutely love to.
And if you have more time next time, I'd really like to get into your story, because I know you've got an interesting story of how you came to be in this organization and all the things that you did to get here. So
I'd love to tell it.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Louis, for being on, and we'll be in touch.
It's an honor, and thank you for what you're doing, Stephen, and thank you for your way of witnessing to the new evangelization and being an important source of news for people around the country.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
You have been listening to the OnePeterFive podcast. This has been a production of OnePeterFive Incorporated, copyright 2016, all rights reserved. Please remember to visit us online at www.onepeterfive.com. You can join our Facebook page at facebook.com/OnePeterFive and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/you guessed it, OnePeterFive. If you feel we have provided you with something of value, please hit our donate page located at onepeterfive.com/donate and make a contribution. It's tax deductible and not only helps pay for our web hosting and the fine content we provide, but keeps food on our tables, coffee in our cups, and the lights on, which really helps us see what we're doing. Until next time, I'm Steve Skojak. Thanks for listening.